Suzanne Spooner is a level 3 practitioner in the Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique that was pioneered by Dolores Cannon, and for the last 13 years has been helping clients remember past lives, recover from major illnesses and injuries, and alleviate post-traumatic stress disorder. And today she's here to discuss with us some of the latest information she's been getting from clients regarding 3-Eye Atlas, the future of our planet, and the role of President Trump.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome to the show, Suzanne. Great to have you back.
Well, thank you for having me, Michael. I'm happy to be here with you. It's always fun.
Yeah, no, it is good. And I know you recently, well, actually, maybe we should begin for those that don't remember or are new to the program. Well, why don't you just explain, what a level 3 QHHT practitioner is and, what you've been doing for the last 13 years.
Yeah, okay. Well, QHHT is a hypnosis process that was created by the late Dolores Cannon, an amazing woman in the field of hypnosis. Her technique is different than most because not only does it take clients to other lifetimes or experiences that their soul contains, but it also gets them very easily connected to the part of them that knows everything we call the high self or subconscious. And then that part answers a list of questions that the client came into the session with about their life and about their health issues and lots of different things. So it's an amazing experience. And I was just very honored to be able to learn from Dolores in person back in 2012, and then really quickly started having the extra great experience of assisting her and her daughter, Julia Cannon, in class, which allowed me to just kind of sit back and keep learning from the master herself and ask her a lot of questions and really kind of dive into her mind a little bit about all this knowledge that she carried. And so since her passing in 2014, Julia's carried forward the class, and we taught around the world after that. Everything's online now for the most part. And all throughout that, I have been giving sessions here in Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm very grateful for the experience with Dolores. My life has been immensely enhanced by getting to meet my clients and take them on this amazing journey within themselves.
Well, it's great that you actually got to meet with and train directly under Dolores Cannon. That must have been quite a thrill, because I know she has quite a reputation and, of course, extensive interaction. She must have worked with thousands of clients. I think when I was starting back around 2001, she already had been in the field for well over a decade or two. And so, yes, she must have worked with thousands of clients over the years.
Yeah, she was fun. She had this mind like a steel trap, and she usually would have 2 or 3 books that she was writing at one time. She'd be teaching all over the world, and this woman had more energy than I can imagine. But you could sit down with her and say, "Hey, Dolores, what about in your book, Jesus and the Essenes, when your subject was talking about this or that?" And she would her head would go right there. And she's like, "Oh, let me tell you about that. And here's what I didn't put in the book. And here's what I was thinking about the client." And, she was a very special, humble soul to do the job that she came here to do, and did it fabulously.
Well, she was definitely at the cutting edge of this whole kind of emphasis on helping people remember past life memories and to integrate those memories and to use that to resolve current issues and illnesses. So, yeah, maybe just if you say a few words about how helpful it is to recall past life memories in resolving current life health issues.
Oh my gosh, it is amazing because we kind of have to change our way of thinking about it away from modern medicine and such. Because what Dolores found in her decades of work is that as far as illness goes within the body or discomfort within the body, everything relates back to our thoughts, our beliefs, and our experiences. And when we get the actual symptom coming through, the symptom is just a message that's trying to be relayed to get our attention to change our thoughts, beliefs, or experiences. And if we're, back in our head, we're looping the same thought over and over, like I'm not good enough, or I can't be loved, or something like that. Each thought affects different parts of the body. So if you're looping that one thought in many, many different ways, very subconsciously most of the time, then, or in a victim mode, gosh, everybody treats me terrible, and you kind of just keep stirring that up, those thoughts end up coming out through the physical body. And so what her process was dynamic in doing is the higher self, the part of us that knows everything about us, every lifetime we've ever had, every thought we've ever had, that higher self is aware of. And so when a client comes into a session, it masterfully picks the lifetime or two or more, or the experiences that the client needs to see to help them understand their life better, that in many cases relates back to their physical well-being. And so they get the real background story of where this came from, this illness or this issue within the body, and then they can understand it. But when we're in the midst of a session and we're talking with that part of them that knows everything, we're finding out so much important information about where it began at, what they've learned from it, because we all create our own stuff and we can all learn from our own stuff. So once we understand the lesson of the issue, then we can move forward. As you and I and everybody is just energy in these unique, dense forms. As energy, we create our stuff. As energy, we heal our stuff. So it's 100% common that people can heal themselves no matter what it is during a session if they're open and willing to do so. It's our old thoughts, beliefs, and experiences that created the issue. And you, as your higher self, because it is you, will give the information that's needed to move forward, doing new thoughts, beliefs, and experiences that support the healing. And if the person after the session can take the information that they gave themselves, it's not me healing anybody, it's not me answering any questions, this is them, they're the only filter. But if they can take the information that they gave themselves, make those changes, then the symptoms just drop off, because they've done their job, they've delivered the message, and it's been acted upon. And I think that is probably one of the most empowering experiences that a human being can have, is to realize you're not a victim, and that you have control over changing the health of your body or the understanding of your life, and move forward in your highest and best way. It's a pretty cool job.
Yeah. Now, I did read probably half a dozen of Dolores Cannon's books, and what I found was that she had quite a few clients that she consulted or took under hypnosis, and she would regress them, and that they would be talking about things that they, in their normal life, just didn't believe. And I think that's kind of really interesting, and it kind of helps prove the kind of like credibility of QHHT, that that people would be brought back to a past life. Like Mary today is a fundamentalist Christian, but yet in the Atlantean era, she maybe was into some sort of new agey type manifestation trend, and so yeah, I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about that as a practitioner, how sometimes you take the clients and I guess they not always, but sometimes can be in full trance and they just don't believe the stuff they're talking about when they wake up?
Yeah. Okay. So that is usually the best, because, I tell everybody you can't make this stuff up. As much as when a client walks into my office here, they never know where they're going to go or what they're going to see. They may think they have an idea, but it's very rarely what they thought it was going to be. And that is such the people. Okay. So I had this long period of time where I was attracting a lot of couples to my sessions. So I have a husband one day, a wife the next day, or it might be two sisters or mother and a son, just two people that know each other. And it was so funny, Dr. Sala, because it would usually one client would be really into Dolores and they read her books and they get it, and they're here, they're ready for it. And the other one would be drug here, like, oh my God, I don't even know what this is. I don't know who Dolores is, and sometimes I'd have to say, you don't have to do this if you don't, believe in it or don't want to do it. It's totally up to you. And usually their fallback would be, oh no, I'll disappoint, my husband or whoever it is, So interestingly, it was usually the one that wasn't into any of this that had the most jaw-dropping experience because they had no expectations on it, right? Not to say that the others didn't as well, but I think to them, here's what I know with all of my heart with this work that I've done with QHHT is that you can't fail it. Your high self is going to create the experience that you need that day to help you understand your life and why it's been the way it's been and how to move forward in your best way. It just looks like a lot of unique, different experiences, which it is. That's why you can't really tell anybody what it's going to be like because we won't know till the end of the day. But the ones that, there's one lady that comes to mind as we're discussing this. And she did not believe in past lives. She thought it was all a big crock of stuff. And her husband really was into it. And before we start the hypnosis portion, we just sit back here, 2 chairs, and we sit and talk. And I'm kind of explaining how the process works a little bit and giving them some help in understanding how they help themselves through this, because I can't make anybody do this. It has to be on their, it's up to them how deep they go with this. And so I get done, I kind of rework how I say things because she's not believing in past lives. She doesn't believe in hypnosis. When you're dead, and that's it, So I'm rewording how I deliver this information to her. As I'm delivering this information with anybody, I'm also starting to put them under a little bit. So everything's, it was a little trickier, because I had to work within her belief system, right? Which I love to do. It's fun to shift and change things up a little bit. But when I get done explaining how she's going to help herself do this, she just sat back in her chair and she says, I just want you to know, I think this is all BS. Like, yay. Okay, and again, I think I inserted, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. We can just call it a day if you're not willing. And she's like, no, I think she said, I've wasted this much time. Let's just keep going. I love her. Oh my gosh, she was awesome. So we do. So we started in on the hypnosis, and it's, sometimes it's, the left brain's really conscious now during hypnosis. It's a shift that we've created, and for a very good reason. We can talk about that soon if you want to. But that left brain is more active now. And so she wasn't helping it to settle down, she was stimulating it. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of back and forth between the right side and the left side. We really want to be on that right side where all that knowing is at. And so we played, kind of ping pong back and forth for about an hour. It takes me a while before I can just think, I don't know what else to say, to help them. I can only do my best. And I was about one question away from giving up with her. And I'm like, I'm going to ask one more question. And I move her and I'm like, okay, now what's the very first thing that you see? And she goes, oh, there's planets and stars and I'm on a spaceship. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And we go into this amazing session, and she's on a planet, and she's essentially finding out the viability of life on the planet. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And I'm like, I can't believe she's doing this. This is so great. And she says, I'm taking readings or something like that. I said, oh, how do you do that? And I don't know how you do this so well when your eyes are closed and you're in this deep, relaxed state. But she looked at me as if I was like the biggest idiot on the planet, not knowing that answer. And she goes, with my T-track device. I'm like, oh, the T-track device. I'm like, oh, gosh, I don't know what a T-track device is. Can you explain it to me, please? And she's like, with her eyes closed, like, so annoyed with me. And then she describes this T-track device. So, I mean, we're off and running at that point. Her high self was a rock star and went through all of her list of questions and explained things that she hadn't even explained to me while she was telling me about her life story. And I count her up at the end, and she opens her eyes up, and she just looked at me like with deer in headlights and said, I'm Godsmacked. And I'm like, I know, that's what this is. This is so great. So I actually have her session up on my YouTube. I can't think of the title of it. I'll get it to you. But that is such a beautiful example of somebody whose philosophies did not line up with the work that I do. And people don't have to believe in past lives to have a session. And your higher self is amazing at finding what you will accept as information and working with that. Sometimes it's just a memory from your childhood that can give you the same information that a whole past life can. So your higher self is really super duper smart in finding the context of the material that you, the client, can accept and work with. And everybody's different. It's going to come in unique ways.
So I wanted to dive a little into the whole idea of the higher self and how that relates to QHHT. Because and you can just elaborate on that. But obviously, the being in the light is like a representation of the higher self, and the person in kind of like 3D at the bottom is like the ego consciousness. So I would assume that in QHHT, I mean, in this life, you have this kind of connection. In a prior life, you have like a different ego self. It would be completely different, but the higher self would be the same, and so on. So if you look at a person's life history, maybe they've had 10, 20, 30 reincarnations. So you have like 10, 20, 30 separate ego consciousness. Some lives as a man, some as a female. But the higher self is the same, is the source for all of those. So, do you want to elaborate, explain that?
Yeah. So the way that I've grown to understand it through all of my experiences, Michael and Suzanne are like a piece of the pie of each of our whole souls, right? So we have many pieces of pies, many lifetimes in physical form and non-physical form. Everything is created for us to experience. And the high self is the part of us, it's us, but it's the part of us that has the whole pie. It knows everything. And you're right, each lifetime, if we're looking, I guess let's look at it kind of in a linear fashion because that's what we're used to in this world. But each lifetime kind of builds on the next in many times. This is the case where you're perfecting a purpose or a lesson. Sometimes we don't finish that, and it's like we pack it up in our suitcase in the in-between life, and we go right into our next life, and we've got the same stuff we're dealing with. We're going to have a different cast of characters, and we're going to have a different scene, but we're going to still be working with the same issue. And so the high selves are, it's a really interesting phenomena. There are many layers to the high self. There's many layers to the high self from, if I was going to do a hierarchy, the lower ones are more human-like. They have a sense of humor. They crack jokes. They're very relatable. And then on the other extreme of that, the the high selves can appear as very lofty. They really don't have a sense of humor, or they're in a different plane of existence. I had one like that a while back that, the client was just awesome and open, and she's, real bubbly. She had this great list of questions. Her high self was very lofty, very kind of detached a bit, but her high self, that's how her high self decided to come through. This is what the client needed to experience. And I'm asking her list of questions, and the high self just does this big sigh and goes, questions, 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 Suzanne. Why do we have to go through all these questions? And I said, well, that's our deal. Remember, that's what we decided. That's what we all signed up to do here today. And it says, but I know all the answers, and I know, right, but she doesn't remember. So you need to explain it to her. That's why we're here, to help her. And did another, okay, what's the next question? But that client, for some reason, created that version of her high self to come through, because that's what she would relate to. So, that's part of the great joy of my job, is I never know which flavor of the high self I'm going to get. And then I work with that. That part of them is a hoot. Oh my gosh, I love what I do.
Yes, that's interesting. So, I mean, with that particular client, when you go back in life, you get that flavor of the higher self. If you went back to another life, would you get a different flavor, or is it the same?
I think, okay, that's a really good question. I don't know that answer, but I'm going to give you what my thoughts are on that, because I think these are the things that I like to think about while I'm driving around in my car. So I think, let's take that client as an example. If that client would have had another session with me the very next day, and she would have gone to it maybe a different other lifetime, her high self might have been real similar, but could have been very different. I've had, personally, I've probably have had maybe 12 sessions over all these years, and my high self isn't the same flavor every time. It's actually quite different. So my guess is that energy of us aligns with where our physical 3D energy is on that day of that session, and it adjusts to exactly how we need that experience to play out, how the voice, the cadence, the emotion. So I think, you're a different you today than you were yesterday. So am I. So I think it just keys into that moment of now during the session and produces exactly what that client needs at that time. The fun part too is, again, because we're more aware in this deep state of hypnosis or relaxation, still in deep, but more aware, that gives the left side of our brain a little bit of opportunity to pipe in and ask a question. Or sometimes when I'm dealing with the higher self, it'll say, well, he's wondering, with what I've just told him, what if things would have gone the other way? What would have life been like? So that part of you is always connected to all of you. And sometimes we do a bit of a three-way conversation with that part of us. We're so multidimensional. And this is just a process that demonstrates it clearly.
Well, this kind of takes me to maybe it's a little philosophical, and I don't know how much you want to go into that, but I mean, if we look at, there's the ego self, then there's the higher self, which remembers all the lives of the ego self. Is there something higher than the higher self, whether we call it the monadic self or the infinite source intelligence, something higher which remembers all that is and is connected to the whole universe type thing? So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's a great topic to come up with, because a lot of times in these sessions you'll hear the higher self say we, they refer to themselves in plural. And oftentimes I'll ask, for the client, because I'm trying to think of questions throughout that session that the client might have questions about what they've said. So I'm like, who are we? Explain that. And they'll say, we're a source, we're a collection of all knowledge. And, it's an illusion that you're separated from us. Again, we're going to have to deal with our perception versus their perception versus an even higher perception. And sometimes we'll even talk about other sources. Sometimes, our source we feel would be the end all be all, but in many sessions, they talk about sources above source.
Interesting. Okay. So that does kind of like address that. So how do you get your clients to connect with the higher self to gather information? I know you take them under and you bring the higher self in and you get information, but so obviously you bring that in or you help the client connect to the higher self. But in that process, is there something you do to help the clients connect if they wanted to with their higher self?
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of like a little journey. And so as you move down the journey during the session, during the day, it's a long day. Usually it's about 5 to 7 hours or longer, however long it needs to be. It goes fast, so it's not like a drudgery day at all. But I honestly believe the session starts when the client reaches out to make the appointment. The wheels are turning. And by the time they get to my door at my office, they're very ready for this. They may not feel it. They almost always will voice, oh my gosh, I'm worried that I can't do this. And what if I don't answer my questions, or what if I don't get healing? What if I can't be hypnotized? Those are really common thoughts that everybody has. And for most people, this is the first time they've ever done hypnosis. Very few have had other experiences with that, but it's actually such an easy thing to tap in. So that's my job. I'm just explaining to them how easy this is to get to this deeper state of themselves and to trust the flow of information that's always there. That part of us has always been here. It always wants to give us the answers and help us, but we elected to be in a reality with duality, and in that we've turned off our knowing and our understanding of this part of us that knows everything. And we've been guided to do that through the controllers of the planet. Because if we knew we had instant access to all this knowledge and could heal ourselves at any time, then we wouldn't be controllable. But we've agreed to come into an experience that has control, that makes us not victims. We chose to be into this experience. They chose to do what they're doing. We've chosen to waken up, for a lot of us, from that experience, which is a beautiful thing. But I can help them as much as they will allow me to. I can't force anybody to do this. So it's, I think by the time they get here to my office, they've waited a while. My wait is long. And for them, that's apparently what they needed, because the high selves will talk about this all the time, about how this day is meant to be their day. They weren't meant to be here earlier. They weren't meant to be here later. This is their day. And I really honor that, and feel very honored to share this experience with them on their day. And, it's been such a beautiful view of this huge leap in evolution that we've had just in the 13 years that I've been doing this. And you see it in how the clients experience deep hypnosis. When I first started, almost everybody was still having amnesia state. That meant they didn't fall asleep in the session, but to them, it felt like it. They felt like they weren't present during their session to them. Afterwards, when I count them up, it would be very common for them to say they remembered nothing, or just little tiny bits and pieces. So from about 2013 back several decades, when Dolores started doing this, I think it was the 80s, they would have that amnesia state. So when I was in class with her, she started to explain this change because it had just started to begin with about 2011, 2012, where people weren't having amnesia state. Every once in a while, somebody would behave differently. They would remember more afterwards. They'd feel more present during the session. So she would explain it to us in class the best that she knew for that time. And the way that she would describe it was, oh, you're going to get these left brainers. And we're like, ooh, bad left brainers. And, they're going to come up. You're going to put them down. They're going to come up. You're going to put them down. It's going to be so much work, And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so lazy. I don't want to work, And so when I came back and started giving sessions, I really started very quickly interviewing the high selves. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know everything. And so when we were talking on the subject of why are these people feeling more aware in the sessions, we really liked it when they checked out. They didn't have to work hard. I didn't have to work hard. My laziness was like, let's do it this way. And the high selves were great teachers to me about this. And they said, you're looking at this all wrong. You're seeing it as a problem. What you're actually witnessing is a leap in human evolution. And then I'm like, okay, I'm in, explain this to me. And they said, you're going to get more and more clients that are feeling aware because that's what has to happen. They have to get to the point where they're like their high selves in an awake and aware physical body. That's the goal. And you can't do that in amnesia state. In amnesia state, they're very disconnected from the whole experience. But we needed that back then to start trusting and questioning that we have all the answers within us, that we're so much more than what we've been told or what we believed about ourselves. And that amnesia state, they said, was just a tool to unlock all this knowledge within us. It was perfect. So divinely planned. And they said, you're going to start seeing people are in this more aware state and able to access that deep, profound knowledge. And that's where we want them to be, because we want them to be able to tap in at any time. When you're driving in your car and you're pondering a situation, what do I do about this? That high self is right there going, hey, here's why it's happening. Here's what you're learning from it. And here's what you can do to change it. We want them to have the same access that they have in a session on their own. And that's where we're headed. And that's why it's not that people aren't in deep anymore. They are in deep and somewhat aware. So it's a very good thing. We just have had to learn how to work through that because, if you're a great lover of Dolores and you read her books and you watch her on YouTube still, you'd hear her say or read, my clients don't remember anything. And that became a gold standard. And we've moved beyond that now. There's a reason why people feel more aware. And it's not a bad thing. It's a super good thing.
Actually, that's a very important point that you just made there, that there's been an evolution in QHHT and that it began with Dolores because that amnesiac state was necessary. That's how people's higher self would be able to come in. But over the years, it's possible now for people to be aware or awake during the session and like hear that, a part of it, like what you just described, that lady a little earlier who was really skeptical and didn't believe it in it all, and then was gobsmacked by it. That because she heard it, right? So she wasn't in a state of amnesia, so she heard it all. So there for her it was like, okay, so she's made a connection now to her higher self, or she knows the higher self is there, and that right now you're the intermediary, but at any time, that connection to the higher self is available to her. So yeah, that's a very important point. So we are evolving as a species where things like QHHT are helping us make that direct conscious connection to the higher self.
Yeah, it is. It's been an amazing point of view to sit in this chair and see thousands of people and have their experiences unfold in front of my eyes. And the beauty of that is the answers they receive are not always the answers they expected. And to me, that's like gold. They've reached into a part of themselves that knows something so much more deeply and profoundly than their awake and aware left brain self knows, and can give them information completely unexpected. And it's amazing because you can't really question that. I mean, that's valid. And I think, when they are aware, I still say they're not fully awake and aware in doing this yet. We're like so close. We're like that close. But they're always in deeper than their left brain wants to admit they are, because this left brain, before it got to at the beginning of a hypnosis part, it would kind of pick up, go out down the hall, around the corner, sit in a nice comfy chair, and so politely wait to be called back in at the end. I mean, that's what amnesia state days were like. And now the left brain is like an active participant in this. Our goal is to have it be paying attention in the back seat. We don't need it running the show. We want it to be listening and learning to this other side of itself that has all these great answers. And so it's really a profound part of the session now, because all throughout the hypnosis portion, the awake and aware person is like trying on the clothes of the high self and going, oh yeah, that's what it feels like. And I've had that feeling before. And I've had this knowing before, maybe it was a dream or, yeah. One great example I can give you of when you are connecting with your high self without even probably realizing it is, it's like when you're having a conversation with maybe somebody you care about deeply. Heck, it could even be a stranger that you are in an elevator with. I don't know what. And they're telling you about a problem that they have, and oh my gosh, it's terrible. And you would love to give them some advice, but you've never had that problem. You don't know what to say, but you really want to help. And all of a sudden, your mouth opens up and this perfect blah, 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 blah comes through. And even you're riveted by this blah, blah, blah. And it's usually long blah, 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 because you're sitting there thinking, where is this coming from? This is really good. And you get done, and your friend or the stranger will go, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed to hear. How'd you do that? And you go, I don't know. And they say, that was so good. Can you repeat that? And you'll go, no, I don't know what that was. That was great. And in that moment, what you did without even trying, being fully awake and aware, not preparing for it one iota, is you quieted down that monkey mind of the left brain to freely speak the stream of thought from the right side, which we're calling the high self. And that's delivering the information from that well of all knowledge that we're tapping into in a QHHT session. So people do this naturally all by themselves. It's just that we're not taught what we're doing, and we're not aware of how we do it so that we can keep doing it. It's always like an epiphany, a rare moment. But this demonstration in a QHHT session of connecting for 2 hours or more into that part of you that knows everything is what gives you the tools after the session, as you get back into your life again, to recognize that part of you that's always present and always willing to help and asking for that guidance. It's life-changing if you allow it to be.
So in establishing this connection to the higher self, or the inner self, some people prefer to call it the inner self, how foolproof is that connection to deceptive beings? Some people have made the claim that, QHHT practitioners, they can be hacked by grey extraterrestrials who pretend to be the higher self and fool the clients. So what do you say to that?
Oh my God, that is such hogwash. That is so ridiculous. Okay, all things are possible, right? So I can't. Okay, all things are possible, but no way, because the practitioner. I mean, I can't. I mean, I can only speak for myself. I'm coming at it with such a clear work of the heart. And even when, clients will come in and they've had all sorts of different experiences and tapped into lots of different belief systems, and they might say, I think I have an entity on me or whatever. And, I run the QHHT official forum. So I see practitioners come in with questions every day about their sessions experiences. And sometimes they'll say, there's been this, this thing that seemed not like the high self that came through. Rare, so rare. But we're all source, right? So I mean, we've got good days and bad days, and good versions of ourselves and not so good versions of ourselves. We've all had that's part of the human experience. So it, to say something like, that practitioner may not, be an unknowing conduit for this energy. No, because we're working with source and ultimately, and now that client that day or that practitioner that day, I'm just going to say, may have needed that experience to understand something. And for them, that was their version of what they needed. Never, ever, ever in my experience has that ever happened without getting a deeper understanding of it. So, maybe somebody lays down and they're going to, this, cruddy, mean version of themselves comes out and, I'm in control of the session, all that, like I'll give them the floor for a while. Like I'll rap with them. Like, what do you want to talk about? Why are you here? What do you need to do? And then, usually just in a conversation back and forth, we get around to, they realize that they're light, and they thought it would be kind of entertaining to be the scary thing for the client to experience. I mean, I'm telling you, like probably 5 sessions or less out of thousands. But nobody can be hacked. You have free will, and your intention is what drives any experience. So if that's your intention to be a practitioner and pull through that stuff, you have to have agreement with the client on some level to have that experience, and you're both learning from it. It's not what I would choose to learn from, but no, unequivocally, that is not the case with QHHT.
Okay, so QHHT is firmly focused on creating the conditions for the client to be able to interact with their higher self, to be able to learn about the past lives and heal and get over traumas and so forth.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of conscious intent or an agreement there between the client and the practitioner that it's all about connecting with the higher self. So is that the key then to differentiate between, say, what happens in a QHHT session and what happens in, say, a channeling, where someone says, well, I'm going to open the psychic doorways to Ashtar and the Ashtar command. So Ashtar, tell me what's going on.
Right. Oh my gosh. This is a fun conversation. Okay. Well, I channel. So I'm ready for you. Let's do this. Okay. So that's where I began. I began with this process that came through me that it took me a while to understand what it was the art of universal knowing, or the acronym is TAUK, talk. So I teach people how to talk through channeling. And it's okay. So QHHT versus channeling can it be very, very similar and can have different flavors. In a channeling, you're still in a somewhat aware state, but you're letting this information come through you, not from you, right? Similar to a QHHT session. But when I channel, I've done that for longer than I've done QHHT. That started back in, I think, 2009 with me. I've had lots of conversations with lots of different beings, entities, versions of myself. My intention with that process, even before I knew I was going to be teaching it, was that I just wanted to have the best connection for my highest and best good. I didn't want it to be like a Ouija experience. It wasn't inviting everybody in to play. I just wanted to do right by myself with that information. And so in the messages I was receiving back at the beginning, they were kind of teaching me about this process and how it works and how to stay on track in the light and create that. And every once in a while, what I started to learn was even if I was having a message with God, or my dad that passed over, or somebody that I loved a lot, sometimes there'd be like a little infiltration. And I could feel it because the messages would start to go off a little bit. They'd be a little bossy or a little unkind or a little too promising, or, it felt off. And so that was part of my learning of dissemination between, what I wanted to connect in with and what was coming on. And so what they taught me was when you're in that state of channeling, I would even say giving a session and receiving a session, a QHHT session, you're opening yourself up to this connection. Now, you want to be kind of in this bubble of light, so to speak, to get that pure, deep information. The other, I really hesitate to call dark, although that's the term that I guess a lot of people are used to. It's a different, lower form of vibration and frequency, and it's on its own path. So I try not to judge it. It's just, that's what it is. And so every once in a while that would come into my messages, and I wouldn't entertain it a lot. I would say that's probably where I learned my great skill of being an observer and not getting my emotions tied into this information as it was happening. And so they would say, when I get to communicating with that for a little bit, they'd say, we're not trying to bother you. When you're doing talk, you're like this really bright light and you show up in our field and we want to know what's going on over there, like a moth to a flame. And we like to play. And sometimes, we'll be God, and we'll say some dicey things or things that you weren't expecting. And so I kind of got to understand what that field is like in that regard. And what I chose to do with it was not go into fear. And I chose just to send it love. And I would ask sometimes, do you want to go to the light? Are you done with your experience in this, whatever world you're experiencing? And oftentimes they would say yes. And there was one time, it just gives me chills still to this day. I was kind of doing that conversation, and so I sat back, I put my pendulum down. It's the tool that I use for this. And I just visualized sending that soul into the light and, helping it out the best in the highest way that I could assist it with. And then several weeks later, it might have been a month or two, that one popped back into my energy field while I was doing a message and said, "Hey, it's me. I'm the one that was, pretending to be God, and I just wanted you to know I made it to the light, and I'm so grateful and thankful." And, it's like, you just can't judge, we're all on the path that we're supposed to be on, and everybody's path is different. And we're just now living in a time where it's really, really clear what path everybody's on. And, you just, take an observer role to it and don't absorb it so much and don't get tied into the highs and lows of these emotions, and you'll benefit yourself so much, I believe.
So how important is it to connect with your higher self in order to communicate with these other entities, and whether we're talking astral entities, people who have lived and died, passed on, or whether we're talking about extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials? How important is it to first establish a strong connection to the higher self before opening up those kind of channels of communication?
Well, I don't know. Maybe that would be a perfect world experience when I kind of dumbassed my way into all of this. So I didn't even have that concept of let's do this first and we'll do that. When I sat down, on my very first message, I would say was a God message. I didn't know what in the heck just happened. I don't know. No clue. Like, I just decided to try this out and see what happened. And it was a beautiful short message. And, after that, I just stayed. Maybe they were keeping a little shield over me before I knew to do it myself at all. I'm not really into fear, so I don't even go there. But my second message was from my dad, who I trusted with all of my heart, and I was so grateful to have a connection with him after he had passed. And so it actually was a long time before. I don't know if my high self came through on its own or if I asked to talk to it. I don't know which way that went, but I have spoken with my higher self through my channeling, and it's awesome. But I always, before I start, I clear myself and I clear my space, um, and I always ask who wants to come through, because I figure they know better than I do of what I need to hear and who I need to hear from. And so that's how I usually begin. And it's sometimes it's who I know, and sometimes it's not. But I'll listen to the flavor of the information that's coming through, and it's almost always just very high level, beautiful, loving information. So I can dial it in. I can ask specifically to speak to different versions of myself, or different souls who have crossed over, and but usually I'll just let it organically form who wants to come through with what message.
Well, this is a kind of a question that kind of follows on from that, and that is that in establishing this connection to the higher self, does that insulate us or protect us from being deceived by these very evolved, immortal beings who many claim are coming back? And we're talking about the returning gods, Yahweh, Kalki, the Mahdi, Enki, Quetzalcoatl, that different sources will say these beings, and in some cases they're immortals, they're coming back. And and to the ordinary human ego, these are like gods. I mean, they're just like resplendent in terms of their energies, knowledge, and some of them are immortal beings. So how do we, in this kind of vulnerable physical body that lives to 70, 80, 90 years if we're lucky, how do we deal with that? And is the higher self the kind of the way that we can like bring balance into that relationship?
Well, I think you can maybe view the higher self as your pure self, your true self, and that's where I think it is helpful when you have the desire and the knowledge of, hey, I have a higher self. I have this part of me that guides me and knows me better than I know myself. I mean, maybe that's the beginning of that awareness. And then, there are these souls that you speak about. But in on the other side of that, I think we're all that. So it's probably more a recognizing of our truest, highest self in that. And again, that's where it's a, are you going to play in the field of fear, or are you going to not? And fear, Dolores would always say fear is for entertainment purposes only, and so fear's fun. I mean, it's drama, and oh my God, they did this, and oh my gosh, can you believe he did that? And, it's the left and the right, and everything that we're getting right now, everything's so funny and comical actually. But it's where do you want to play in that field? And then the universe, the collective, is going to create that experience for you. So I would, for myself, I've had to get right with fear, and a long time ago, it didn't feel like it was doing me any good. So for the most part, I've let that go, and my experience will reflect that. Now, every once in a while, I'll get pulled back into the drama of it or the worry of it, and I sit with it. And then because I'm aware of it, that it's a thing, not reality, then I can decide what I want to do with that. One of the other really cool conversations we can have, if you want, is all these different versions of ourselves and the different timelines that we're on, besides this one that you and I are on right now, looking at screens and connecting. But we're so much more than what we've been told and what we understand. And so there's not a lot of concern for me about where we go or what we do. We're all doing it all. So all bases are being covered. All boxes are being checked. It's not all that we're aware of. But we're in this amazing dance of a cool 3D reality while we do it.
Okay, yeah, well, we'll start kind of like getting into that timeline topic with this next question, and that concerns 3i Atlas. And this is the latest image that's just literally came out just a couple of days ago, like November 22nd, I think, showing 3i Atlas photographed by some amateur astronomer, which of course is much better quality than what you get from NASA with its billion-dollar telescopes and cameras all over the place. Just like, well, such a joke NASA is. But yeah, what are your clients telling you about 3i Atlas and it being an amplifier of energies?
Well, that's really interesting. When 3i Atlas started to become a thing in our awareness, I had a couple of clients, I think in the same week almost. And I normally would never ask a question other than what their questions are, unless their high self brings up a different topic, then that's a go. But I just kind of had a nudge with this first client. At the very, very end of her session, we'd asked everything possible that I could think of. And I asked them about what's up with this. Do you have any information about it? And again, I don't like to ask other questions. I'm there for my clients solely. So I was a little like, I hope I'm okay doing this. And she said, by the end of it, she's like, we're really glad that you asked that because this information has to get out. I'm like, whew, okay, good. I'm so happy to hear that I didn't cross any lines I shouldn't have. But what they were saying, it's actually been 3 clients that I specifically asked this on. 2 I put out on YouTube clips, 1 I did not, because it was just such similar information. And what they're saying is that it is an amplifier, and they've been coming for eons for this moment. And what they're doing in part is like an overlay to see where we're at as humanity, if we're ready for a leap in evolution or not. And we are. And so the physical thing that we're seeing in the images and all these discussions about what is it, it doesn't even physically have to be close to us to affect us. It's already affecting us. And they're saying that this is a way of projecting ourselves into the next realm of our experiences. And it's very good. And for those that are what we term awake, this will be kind of a fun, easy thing. And for those that we would say are asleep, this is going to be really chaotic and really weird and unsettling. And I think, we've heard for so long this, you need to wake up, you have to wake up, you're asleep, and how people react to that. And some people just want to be asleep. That's what their experience is here to do. But others, I think that maybe the most beautiful part of our experience is the ones that have been asleep that decide to wake up during this amazing time on the planet, because they have the realm of knowledge of what it's like to be asleep and what it's like to be awake. And, the higher selves are just awake, so they really don't get into the sleepy part that we've had. And the 3i Atlas is coming and into our awareness to be a great accelerator of human experience. And it's like, like getting a big giant booster shot into the next dimension. And, people are going to experience that in different ways. But the more we talk about it, even people that aren't into it might hear about it. And it's like breadcrumbs being dropped, and maybe they'll be like, let me look into that. And what are they saying about it? And, and I honestly think that ridiculous thing that NASA put up, the 4 or 5 people and that lady up at the podium, taking questions and giving answers. It was so ridiculous. It was so ridiculous that I think people that were asleep had to go, come on, we're being played. That seriously? And honestly, I think those actors in the NASA sphere are doing us all a great favor by being so ridiculously ignorant on everything, because it helps people wake up. And sometimes, if this is a big movie, you have to have those scenes where it's just like, that's ridiculous. I cannot believe that. And, it's part of the deal.
So it being a amplifier of energies, so those that are interpreting it in a kind of negative light, that, oh, well, Three Eye Atlas is carrying, 500 million reptilian warriors here to invade and take over the planet, and there's going to be a huge war or something, or those that are looking at it as like disseminating light codes from an ancient Lyran civilization, which is going to activate our 12-strand DNA, which is inherent within our kind of like genetics. Are we talking about a kind of like splitting of humanity, or are we talking about different timelines between those that choose to go with the negative interpretation and the fears that go with that, as opposed to those who go with the more positive interpretation and the kind of like hopes and aspirations that go with that?
Well, I think it's a bit of that. It's even more than hopes and aspiration. It's really like, what's your heart belief in this? What's your understanding for yourself? And so I don't think it's a ship full of reptilians at all. I do believe it's consciousness on a level and scale that we probably can't comprehend yet, but we're given the opportunity to learn from it. And I think these experiences that we're having as it goes behind the sun, and all those solar flares came up, and we have these beautiful lights in our sky, and and it's coming closer to Earth, the mid-December 19th, I think. I think this is really a special time to go within and create the reality that you wish to experience. And there's always the collective reality too. So you can dip into that and see, what are they all doing out over there, and then go back and like, okay, that's good for them. I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to be like this. And, it's such a vast school, this planet Earth that we're on, and we're expediting our evolution so quickly that it's almost, maybe that's on purpose. Maybe that doesn't give us time to go analyze the crap out of it and water it down and dilute it. Maybe all of this has to be happening so fast. Time is going so fast now, and so much is happening all at once that there's just no way you can grasp onto everything that's going on in the world. And maybe that's by design for this experience that Three Eye Atlas is bringing to us, probably right now, even as we speak. I think it happened way before it came into our existence. Maybe that's part of our awakening from way back. And as it leaves our solar system, who knows what will happen from that point forward. But I think it's just really a good time to check in with yourself and start trusting the knowledge from the heart center, maybe letting the mind be the complement to that instead of the other way around.
So have your clients given you information about what's coming in terms of, some people, I've heard from a lot of people saying humanity is going to split into like 3 or 4 different worlds, a 3D world, a 4D world, a 5D world, and so forth, or timelines. Whereas others say that, no, humanity's we're going to stay together, and we're going to move forward into in these more elevated realms. So yeah, what's your take on all of that?
Yes, all of it.
All the above.
All the above. All the above. Yes, it is, because again, you have to think multi-timeline, and you and I and everybody are on multiple timelines all the time. No pun intended. But So yeah, I mean, I remember back a ways, back when I was new to QHHT, there's going to be a solar flash and everything's going to change all at once, and I'd like be checking in with the high cells, like, dude, is that happening? Like, we don't have to do any work. We're just going to have a big solar flash and we're enlightened beings. And, and so many of the high cells would just giggle and they think, you guys are so lazy, you have to do the work. And I think that's what we've been doing, over this lifetime. And, now we're coming out of that sleep state so that we can be more aware. We're getting closer to being our high self in an awake and aware physical body. And, or not, depending on what you're choosing to experience, is all up to you. I mean, Thanksgiving, this is going to probably air after Thanksgiving, but holiday time is a great time because you're mixing with a lot of different people and sometimes family members that are, I can say from my experience, they think I am nuts, that they can't quite figure me out and what I do and weird, just talk about something normal, so, but I think even some people like that are like, they're starting to have questions about things. And, I think, here in central Iowa, we saw a lot of the Northern Lights a couple weeks ago. With the naked eye, they were just gorgeous and beautiful, and they really came up on the cameras. And I can tell you just from my personal experience, I've never seen them before that. I always thought I was going to have to go like to Iceland or freeze my rear end off in order to see them, which I don't like to do. But I can tell you, for a good 48 hours after that, I felt different. Like, I felt lighter and easier and didn't really contemplate anything that was fearful or worrisome. And it really gave me a pause of thought of, okay, I'm ready for this. I like it like this. And, I think it's natural, it's human nature to tap into the drama and the craziness. And that's what they're saying. I have to say, if there's predictions for 2026, it's chaotic. But then you have to decide what you want to do with that chaos. Do you want to be a participant or do you want to be an observer? And, observer here, I'm telling you, it's a lot easier to understand from that perspective but there I go being judgy. Some people's paths are to be chaos makers and be in the midst of chaos. And that's what their role is. So, I think you have to find what resonates with you and your purpose and what feels right for your path and do it, no matter what that is. If it's a chaos creator, be the best that there is. If it's, finding your center and letting all of that go around you without affecting you, be that. I just think we can't put on false uniforms anymore. I mean, we're going to be what we are. And if you try to go with the flow of other people, it may not feel right. And you're going to kind of drag yourself back a little bit.
So it's November 25 today when we're recording this, and this will come out in kind of early December. So the year's just about over. So what do you see coming, or what have you been told or heard from your clients about what's coming in 2026?
Well, it's all about your perspective. And so, again, you're going to experience what you're perceiving. And that's where, you can turn on a TV and go, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, that's terrible. That's horrible. Look at that guy and look what he's doing. Or you can turn that off and go more within and experience peace. We're creating our own reality. So we have to, once you can accept that proposition that you create your own reality, then you stop being a victim of it. And I think that's where we're at. I mean, that's why, in these QHHT sessions, it's such a beautiful experience because people come in feeling they've been victimized a lot of the time. Life is hard. Human life is tough. And especially, that things that little children are put through that is just so sad, and you think, oh my God, what are the grown-ups thinking, raising them like this or putting them through that. And when you get to the high self, in some regards, that the soul of the client asks to experience a family like that or the dynamics like that, because they know there's so much more than this physical body, and they want to understand a lesson or an experience. And so they create the family or the experiences that look so sad. And like, who would pick that? But we do. And we learn from it. And it's part of the 3D gig is we're going to get the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And that's what we signed up for. And we're going to, hopefully find ourselves through all the mess and become true to our purpose that we chose this life to be here for. And that's where we're at, I think.
Now, in our pre-interview, you mentioned that you have been told that there's a lot of conflict coming in 2026, and that matches what others are telling me, that there's going to be world revolutions or governments are going to be toppled. The people are going to rise up in opposition to these governments that are doing the exact opposite to what's in the interests of people. So, you want to maybe kind of give us an idea of what we can expect in terms of these rising conflicts in 2026?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the perspective of a high self who is talking to me about this. So it's a beautiful conversation. They said, this client in particular had a lot of conflict in their life. So many challenges, horrible things, lifetimes of challenges in one little life. And the high self explained, you see a lot of chaos going on outside in your world. There's always, arguments and governments are crazy and people are reacting in weird ways. And they said, what you're actually seeing is a reflection of what's going on inside each person. Each person, we're at the stage where we're looking at fear and how we decide we're going to handle fear. We're going to entertain it or we're not. And so we're projecting our fear and our chaos that we feel inside and creating it in the outside world. And then we can go, oh my gosh, look at that. Wow, the world's really burning down. It's going pretty crazy here. And that puts it outside of us to think about how we want to reflect inside. It's all connected. It's just one big figure eight, it's all connected. And so I'm getting people saying there's going to be a lot of conflict next year, but again, it's a reflection of what the work that we're all doing within. And so technically, all we can really work on is ourselves. We can't solve the world problems individually to a degree. So we have to go within and decide how are we going to handle, if there is a lot of conflict, if we experience a lot of conflict, what do I want to do about that? And what I want to do about that is I just want to emanate a lot of love and care and kindness and with what's in my sphere, and let that hopefully emanate out into other people's spheres even farther. And then maybe all that chaos that they're predicting tampers down. And maybe we use the energy that's coming in with 3i Atlas and where we're at in the evolution of humanity to turn that around. I mean, nothing's written in stone. We can do anything we want. It's just where we're headed is showing chaos as the flavor of the year. But in the crappiest times, we do the greatest growth. So that's a life thing, right? Nobody asks to have hard times in life. We think we don't want that, but it's usually where we get our biggest breakthroughs and epiphanies and understandings about how we want to move forward. So it's just part of the 3D gig, and that's what we're doing. So, decide how you want to take it.
Okay. I just wanted to go back to an interview that we did last year. And I think this interview was very interesting because we discussed one of your cases where, and this was the interview. I think we did that. When was that? That was.
We were in Egypt.
That's right. When we came back from Egypt, and that was May 27. That this interview we did was published, and in there you talked about a case where one of your clients got information about Donald Trump being an ascended master, and that was really a shock to that client who really thought that, Donald Trump was scum and like a braggart and this bold-faced liar, and they was like, wow, I mean, my higher self is telling me he's an ascended master, but my ego self is telling me this guy's a complete asshole. What's going on here? And so we talked about that. But since that time, others have come forward and have talked about Donald Trump becoming the world's first president, and that kind of, to me, that makes sense in terms of what he's doing to solve all these conflicts around the world, where a lot of world leaders are embracing him as a man of peace, which of course in the United States, people are just, they think, well, Donald Trump, like your client, that he's a scumbag, braggart, fascist. How can he be a man of peace that is going to be a world president? So, do you want to talk about that?
Oh my God, that was such a fun session. So that session actually took place on 11/11/16. So, this client, it was at the very end of the session, and that was the week of the election. So the Thursday or Friday after the election, and neither one of us talked about the election throughout our time of just talking to one another, getting to know one another, never even came into the purview of the conversation. And so it was very surprising at the end, he starts talking about Donald Trump. And so at this point, I have no idea what he thinks about Donald Trump. And I kind of was on I can't figure him out. Like, I just didn't know what to think about him at that time, to be totally honest. And what his information was way back then was, listen, he's an ascended master, and this isn't an easy role that he's picked to take on. And he also has his ego self that he's going to have to work with. So he's got this ascended master side, he's got this ego self, and he likes both sides. They've got, things that he enjoys on both sides of that. But he's going to have to make the decision, Donald Trump, which side is he working with? Is he going to be more egocentric on this, or is he going to be more in the higher realms of how he is a president as a person? And I think he said something like he's a wrecking ball. He's meant to come in to be flipping a wrecking ball on the systems, because the systems are so corrupt. They have to come down, and he's the man to do it. No one else can do this. And so he's going to make a decision on if he's working on the higher good or ego, and that's up to him to decide, nobody else. And so, and then at the very end of that conversation, the client came up a little bit in hypnosis, and it's on my YouTube channel. You can find it if you just search for me and Donald Trump. I think it'll come up. But you hear the client come up a little bit and go, I don't even like the guy. So I'm like, oh, okay. Now I get where he's at. Like, wow, that's really wild conversation to have. If his awakened aware self doesn't care for Donald Trump, but he's saying all these very important things about him, and that has come through in more and more sessions over the years. So that love him or like him, he's here to break us free from these systems that have chained us down, and it's going to get so messy. And that's where once I'm a great observer. So I sat back and I watched the dude, and I'm like, I don't know. Well, that's kind of good, but I don't know. And then once I kind of went, okay, I get you. Like, you're here to be a disruptor. Then everything about him got lighter to me. It's like you could crack up at his jokes, and it's like, okay, maybe you don't agree with everything that he does and how he does it, but the man's brilliant, and he comes from this lineage that is incredibly special, and his connection to, his uncle and Tesla, it's not coincidence. And I think, it's when you get funneled down into watching what he says or how he moves or whatever, the policy perhaps, you really lose sight of the whole scope of him and what he's doing. And I think that's where it's, you kind of have to step back and just let him do his stuff and see how it plays out. But, didn't he just create something through the United Nations, which is such a corrupt body anyways, but he's the board of directors for like a world organization. So I think, I don't know, something might be cooking there, but he is amazing at finding peaceful solutions. And I think, for the people that have still this anger and fear and those emotions that their soul needs to work on, he is such an awesome guy because they just get riled up with him. And, it's the Trump derangement syndrome. And man, he's like the perfect tool for them, to work through all of that in an expedited manner. So, yeah, I think he's a pretty special guy.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that UN resolution, because that's unprecedented. Never before has the United States voted in the Security Council for a resolution that impacts Israel. The US typically vetoes those kinds of decisions, but here it voted in favor, and it really pissed off the current administration in Israel, which really is looking for a way to restart the violence or this war there in the Gaza Strip. But Trump is serious. I mean, it's like he's got this UN Security Council resolution now establishing a kind of board of peace, and he's the chairman of this board of peace. And the Saudi government and other governments, probably Turkey and all of that, are going to be on that. What he's doing is he's creating a mechanism to really create peace in the Gaza Strip, despite what the Israelis do, or what the current Netanyahu government wants to do, which is gung-ho to let's go in there and finish the job. And despite what Hamas wants to do is we'll fight to the last Palestinian drop of blood to hold on to our holy land. Trump's coming in to bring about peace there, which is a kind of amazing. And when you look at what he's been doing elsewhere, I see this is like an unfolding plan to make him this president who promotes world peace, and I think it's going to spill over to disclosure as well. That he knows a lot about the ETs. So do you know
that's exactly where I was headed with this? Is
Please,
wouldn't that sets the stage for, guess what, guys? Those of you that weren't aware, we're not the only ones here in the galaxy. So yeah, I mean, everything is lining up perfectly. 3i Atlas. I mean, that's quite a conversation that most people weren't expecting to have, which is amazing. And yeah, and this whole latest, I can't remember the name of that movie that just came out, Age of Disclosure or something like that. So I think that I haven't watched it, but I think for people that have been in this community for a long time, it's well, no big deal. I mean, no news there, but for, again, the people that are just tapping their toes into it, it's maybe they'll legitimize it because of who's speaking and what they're saying. And I mean, I cannot think of anybody better than Trump to do my fellow Americans, we're going to have a talk here. It's going to be dicey for a little bit, but we're not alone. And, maybe pull in, a galactic friend, or I don't know how this is going to play out, but he seems perfect for that role. And, and I think it's all planned, how everything rolls out. And it is, if you step back, it's such an entertaining time to be on the planet right now. There's just so much going on. And we're very lucky to be here to witness it.
Yeah, it is an amazing time. It's a transition time, and I think many of us volunteered to come here and be a part of this and help it all. So, Suzanne, you want to tell people about your website and any special events you got coming up, and anything you want to draw people's attention to?
Oh gosh, yeah, thank you. My website is SuzanneSpooner.com. You can learn how to channel through the process of talk on there. I've taken a break from taking new clients. I'm booked out, I think, to the end of 2028 right now. So I'm just kind of letting that catch up a little bit before I start taking on new QHHT clients. But people can find a practitioner just by going to QHHTofficial.com. But the other fun stuff, and so lucky to have you and your lovely wife with us, is Sarah Brustman-Cosme and I are doing these amazing trips to Egypt twice a year. And that's ancientlifetimes.com is that website. And we just released the tour for September of 2026. They fill up and we sell out every single time. We just released it really yesterday, and we're down to only 2 private rooms available. We still have a few shared rooms available, so they do go quick. But it's that journey to Egypt is to help people remember their own past lives and tap into the amazing knowledge that those sacred sites hold. It changes everybody in ways that they were never expecting, I think. And it's a great honor to guide people through about 2 weeks of amazing interchange and awareness. So that's about it. Still have the book with Beverly coming out. It's so funny. Oh my gosh, Michael, we're literally down to, I need Beverly to look through the last chapter. Just make sure that she's comfortable with how that's set up. But she's in a really busy time of her life. And so it's easy to say and hard to do at this moment, but we've got the publisher, we've got everything. I just need that final okay from her on that chapter. And that's about it. So we really, really, really wanted it to come out in 2025. It has a lot of information about 2025 in it, but I guess we believe that divine timing is always present, and it's going to come out exactly when it needs to. And the material is mind-blowing, and it will still be mind-blowing if it's 2026. But I'll come back on maybe when that comes through, and we can have a chat about that.
Definitely, yeah. I look forward to your book coming out with Beverly and doing an interview about that.
She'd love that.
So I want to thank you, Suzanne, for coming back on the show and sharing all this incredible information about QHHT. And I'll have the links in the description that Suzanne mentioned. And look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right, Michael, it's a joy. Thank you so much for all that you do too.
Aloha.
Aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.